There are several flashback and vision sequences in Taboo. Let's break them down and see what they're trying to tell us. What we continually see in these flashbacks are slaves drowning in the bottom of the ship. We also have the show's opening that shows people drowning along with a torn American flag. And I often wonder if a drowning, torn American flag is supposed to be making a statement. So we know that we see slaves drown, and we know that we see people drown, and we also know that James was on a boat that sunk. It was the Influence, and it was a slave boat. This leads us to believe that these flashbacks of slaves drowning and the show's opening, along with the opening of episode 4, where we see James lying in the water, that these are all connected. They're all the same moment. It all revolves around the ship Influence sinking. Why would James continually be having flashbacks about this sinking ship? Well, there's no doubt that James is partly responsible. He is at least responsible for the slaves that drowned in the bottom of the ship. This was more than evident from the first episode, when James is waiting for the autopsy to be completed on his father, and he begins to have these flashbacks. And while he's having them, he says things. He says, I have no guilt for you. I have no time for you. They're obviously memories that are difficult for James to deal with, that he's trying to bury so that he can complete his mission. As he says to the slave who approaches him, I have work to do. We also hear him tell this slave, we are all owned and we all own others. I was only doing what others did and what others told me to do. So all of this paints a fairly clear picture that James has guilt over the slaves that drowned in the bottom of that ship. Now, I still was not willing to say 100% that this is definitely what's going on until episode 2. James buys a ship, the Felice Adventuratoro. And when he was on the ship, he realizes that it was a slave ship. James goes through a mourning ceremony, but we get a really big piece of information during his mourning. We see somebody hammering the gates shut so that the slaves at the bottom of the ship cannot get up. We see this flashback cut into right when James is hammering on the ship, letting us know that the person hammering that gate shut, trapping those slaves in the bottom of that boat, was James. So this is what the slave drowning flashback is about. James sealed their fate. He sealed them in the bottom of that boat while the boat was sinking. The other cuts and flashbacks do not seem to be something that James experienced, which is why I'm calling them visions. And we've seen 2 different sets of visions. The vision we've seen the most time is the vision with the woman in the water with her face painted white. I've assumed from Nootka Sound. One of my original thoughts was this is obviously James's mother, but it was a bit misleading because she's acting so crazy. And so I just was uncertain as to why James would be having visions of his mother acting that way. Because in the first episode, we also see James talking to Brace about Salish, and we see that James says, we should not bring her name up while we're drinking, inferring that James has a need to protect his mother. So it was odd that if he has this attachment to his mother, if he feels the need to defend her honor, that he would be having visions of her in a way that disrespected her. Now, in the second episode, we get a quick flash of this woman while James is sitting in front of the fireplace right before he searches the drawer where he finds the playbill, where he finds Lorna's name circled. After rewatching this, it becomes obvious that James is trying to locate the Nootka Sound Treaty, and the woman in the vision tells him to look in the drawer. I wasn't for certain about this until episode 3. In episode 3, we get a lot of confirmation about who the white-faced woman is. Because when James goes into the basement looking for the treaty for Nootka Sound, he finds the black dress that the woman wears in these visions. So at this point, it's confirmed this woman in the visions is James's mother. And then he goes up into his mother's room and he begins to have more visions of her. And for the first time, we see her in a peaceful state. Not sure what caused her to become peaceful. Perhaps it is that James is in her bedroom and trying to bond with her, remember her. But in this scene, we see again that she communicates with James. We see that as he is remembering her and she is looking at him, he suddenly has the inclination to break into the fireplace in her room, which is where he finds the Sankofa, which is the bird that's tattooed on his back, carved into the back of the fireplace. He's not sure why it's there. He asks Brace about it, and this is the point where he infers to Brace that Brace knows more than he is actually telling James. We do see another person in these visions with James's mother. They are very, very quick cuts of a man, also with a white face. It's very difficult for me to tell if it's Horace because the makeup makes him look so different. But there is a man in these visions that James is having about his mother. He's not always in them, and there's only quick cuts of him, but he is there. So this man is obviously significant, and it's hard to say if it's Horace, but it may be Horace, because we also see that James does have visions of Horace. One of the most frequent things we hear of Horace through this series is how he used to light his fires and dance on the shore. And James actually sees Horace doing this. When James looks out the window in his father's office, he sees Horace on the shore. The first time in the first episode, he actually sees Horace dancing with a lit fire. He looks out the window in the fourth episode, but Horace is not dancing and there is no lit fire. Horace is just kind of standing there looking up at James. It's hard to say why this changed, why he first saw Horace dancing with a lit fire, and by the fourth episode, he does not see Horace dancing and there is no lit fire. Horace is just standing there. James sees Horace in one other vision, and it's probably the most interesting vision that they've given us so far. When Lorna is confronting James about her owning half of the house. I'm not sure why Lorna gets to James so much, or is it Lorna that gets to him? But James loses it at this point. He freaks out, and right before he freaks out, he does have visions of his mother and of Horace while he's looking at the fireplace. Horace actually morphs into his mother. So it seems in a lot of James's visions that he is seeing both Horace and Salish. The other thing that we do see in these visions is when James is by the fireplace in episode 2 and he sees his mother right before he begins searching through the drawer where he finds the playbill, there is another screenshot in this vision. We see what looks to be a man walking and holding something in his hand, but it's very difficult to tell what any of this is. But it is after this that James gets up and digs through the drawer. So James is having flashbacks and visions. His flashbacks are a memory of when the Influence sank and are related to the guilt that James feels over trapping the slaves in the bottom of this sinking ship. The visions that James is having revolve around his mother and father, Horace and Salish. Pay attention to future flashbacks and visions in this show. They are definitely putting together the backstory of James Delaney. Don't be afraid to like the video if you did. If you have any friends that watch Taboo, go ahead and share the video with them. It'll give you something to talk about. If you want to make sure you catch all of our videos on Taboo, go ahead and subscribe, hit the bell, and you will be notified every time we upload one. You have a great day.